Magsaysay. In Filipino, it means to tell. Like a story, for instance. Stories from the past. About life, love, and courage. Stories about family and friends. Their joys and their pain. Listen now as we tell stories about the Magsaysays and the Rodriguezes.
Lawlaw-lawag ti lubong, entero nga Filipinas. Nga pagsapsapulak, ti kastaking ka nga rosas. Into deng ti Diyos, apuan na marswa. Nga dito'y nga lugar, ti pagkakitaan ta. Iyawa mo man uneneng, tel iliwag nga imam. Tugkudutan tabasit, sinyal pagkakitaan. Tano sa lutsuden to ni inam ken ni amam. Nalipit jay batido, kunam to nga pagpambar. Itod mo man uneneng, tel iliwag nga ladawam. Tajay ko Manila, ti kayat ko pagtaanan. Tano dito'y kulaeng, sakop ti sambalyan. Ay adu nga puso, tinak mapaldangan. That's all. We love the picnics of the cousins because all of us are doubly related. So we felt very much at home, with them. We love all those fruits, like karmay, karmay, you don't know. It's iba. It's called iba. It's a small yellow fruits, very good. Although I know inevitably I'll get tummy ache because I eat that. I love it. I love it there because the river was very nice, cool, and very, very nice. I really enjoyed those days. We were so surprised at these beetles that you can eat. They call abal-abal. They come from the ground. We ate it there. It was fun. And so at night, some people would go there with guitar and sing, and it was really enjoyable.
Magsaysay's ancestors may have been town criers, disseminating news orally, as there were no newspapers at the time, or perhaps people couldn't read. However, the name Magsaysay appears to have been in use for 4 generations, long before the Spanish government began assigning names to Filipinos by the mid-19th century. According to the Catalogo, families who can prove that they have kept their surnames for generations may pass them on to their descendants. It is said that those belonging to nobility or having had links with it had the right to keep their original names, which indicates that the Magsaysays may have been of noble origin. In San Pedro, Makati, there once was a lady from the Magsaysay clan who married a Chinese merchant who, in all likelihood, was a San Li, more popularly known as Sang Li.
He was engaged in a pottery business, and I think they were making tapayan.
In 1830, they had a son named Gregorio who took the name of his Tagala mother. The boy had only one other sister by the name of Juanita, who married Chodoro de Lara.
Well, the story of the Magsaysays in Zambales really started with the Punting. Juanita, the only sister of Gregorio, was married to Chodoro de Lara, who owned a Punting. So the couple traded using the Punting between Manila and Zambales up to Vigan. And that's how they discovered Pundakit, and San Antonio, found a good life in San Antonio, Zambales. So they persuaded the Gregorio and his wife, Sotera Gatpandan, to settle down also in San Antonio, Zambales, together with them. Gregorio and Sotera had 4 children. He had only one daughter, Victoria, or sometimes called Victorina, and 3 boys. The eldest, Domingo Mauricio, Luis, and then Felix.
Their eldest sister, Victorina, was married to a Capitan de Barco with the name of Onandaya. And she was stayed with him in Legazpi, Albay. And Lolo Mingoy, being the eldest brother of Juanito Victorina, was taken back by Victorina to stay with her in Albay.
Meanwhile, half a world away, a young naval officer from Spain was commissioned by the Spanish throne to serve in the Philippines. Teniente Primero Venancio Rodriguez, reportedly an alferez de las Armadas Reales, or standard-bearer of a Spanish patrol fleet, was assigned to oversee the southern part of Zambales, which included such towns as Subic, Castillejos, San Marcelino, and San Antonio, among others. To report to his superiors, he often had to travel by horse to San Fernando, Pampanga. As Betis was on the way, it was there that he met a beautiful young woman by the name of Ambrosia de los Santos. They were married and settled in Zambales, where they had 2 sons, Juan and Eulogio. But early on in the marriage, Venancio fell victim to smallpox, which was claiming lives everywhere. He died in his early 20s. The widow was then awarded a grant by the Spanish throne, covering vast tracts of land in Zambales. It was then she became known as Doña Ambrosia, or Boshang.
From Albay, he went to Zambales and he met a widow. The circumstances of the meeting where. But he met this widow, Boshang, and they married and had 6 children. They are Ezequiel, Carmen, Vicente, Aurea, Ambrosio, and Calixto.
Well, Lolo Juanito took his job as the manong of his Magsaysay siblings very seriously. Even after he married Doña Vicenta, Titang, as she was known, Ferrios, with whom he had 9 children.
Eulogio, Juan's brother, left for Bicol and married a girl from Masbate. They had only one son whom he named Juan, after his brother. Juan later married but had no children. Before the famous cry of Pugadlawin that marked the beginning of the revolution against Spain in 1896, Domingo Mauricio, despite warnings, addressed a letter to the bishop complaining about the cruel acts of priests in the province. He was thrown into a cell at Fort Santiago in Intramuros because of this. There he languished for 3 months. Domingo's son Ezequiel, born in 1874, eventually joined the Pansacula brothers, who were Zambales Katipuneros. Ezequiel was later to become the father of one of the greatest Filipino presidents that ever lived, Ramon Magsaysay. Luis, Domingo Mauricio's brother, married Balbina Canonizado of San Antonio, with whom he had 9 children. He later became Juez de Paz, or Justice of the Peace of San Antonio. He died at the early age of 35 in 1892.
Lolo Felix was my lolo, the father of my mother, Amparing. He was the youngest, and I suppose the last one to get married. It was Don Teodoro de Lara, his uncle, who picked out and arranged for his marriage to Agustina Navarro of Palawig, the daughter of one of his friends, a ship captain in the service of the port of Masinloc, also in Zambales. The two had 14 children.
Felix and his family continued to live with the De Laras to help out in the family business. He became Presidente Municipal from 1898 to 1901. During this time, American soldiers who had taken over the Philippines after the Spaniards tortured Felix into revealing the names and location of the insurgents who were then hiding in the mountains of Pundakit. When he refused to cooperate, he was subjected to the infamous water cure, wherein he was forced to ingest large amounts of water. According to the book, Filipinos and Americans, a love-hate relationship, it took the Americans 111 days and 353 American lives to help the Cubans get their freedom. It took 3.5 years and 4,165 American lives to deprive the Filipinos of their freedom. When Ambrosia died, Domingo Mauricio remarried, this time to a young girl of 16 named Antonina de los Santos.
Stories say that she literally had to be carried to get married to Lolo Mingoy.
They were blessed with 6 children: Cristina, Victorio, Antonieta, Gregoria, Felixberto, and Melitina. Victorio died in childhood.
My grandmother was popularly known as Lola Ninay. Her name was really Antonina Laguni de los Santos. Her mother was Florentina Laguni, and I understand they came from Dinalupihan, Bataan. She was very strict. She was very strict with, and that's why all my aunties after my mother eloped, because she was very strict with boys. And I remember that I learned to eat my ding-ding from her, and of course my pinakbet also from her. But when we had parties, the best food was empasar, which Lola cooked. Lola saw 5 generations in her lifetime, and she died at a very good age of over 90. I think she was 92.
Juan Rodriguez, son of Ambrosia and Venancio, continued to live in Zambales.
Okay, Lolo Juanito became the mayor of San Marcelino from 1901 to 1905. He likewise was named as the sort of governor of the Aitas. And again, he took this job, as he took every job very seriously. And he helped the Aitas. And they loved him. And they called him Apo Lakay, although he was really young yet. He was something like the Phantom. Remember the Phantom comics, where the Phantom was the sort of king of the pygmies. And that's the same thing that happened to Lolo Juan.
As for his sense of responsibility, he volunteered for the First World War with the Philippine contingent, Philippine Scouts, as part of the ambulance corps. But his father, I guess, he already had some premonition of his coming death, asked him not to go because he said, "You're the only one who finished. You're the eldest. if something happens to me, then no one will look after your brothers and sisters.
A few years later, his advice to the young Jose not to join the war proved to be prophetic. As the holiday season drew near, Juan decided to travel to Manila by foot over the mountains of Zambales and Pampanga. He bought gifts for his family as well as various foods, presumably for the Christmas festivities. On his trip back home, he decided to take the Maria Luisa, a Yanko-owned passenger boat. Along with him were some Magsaysay relatives. It was November 16, 1921. The boat was traveling from Bacac, Bataan to Zambales when they were hit by a typhoon just off the coast of Subic. As the storm intensified, the boat began sinking, and the captain hollered, "Abandon ship! Get into the lifeboats!" The Magsaysay ladies, terrified, begged Juan, "Stay! Pray with us!" Being the gentleman that he was, he stayed. The captain repeatedly knocked on their cabin door, but got no response. Finally, one may have convinced them to leave the cabin, but when they emerged, it was too late. The lifeboats were gone, so they had to swim for shore. Though he was reputed to be an excellent swimmer, Juan struggled through the choppy waters with his half-sister Carmen and his cousin Rosalia on his back. One of the survivors claimed he saw the three as they were drowning, desperately clinging on to each other as the waters pulled them into its depths.
The Aitas came down from the mountains, and together with my father, who was then a medical student, together with some of his brothers, scoured the coastline, looking in vain for the body of Lolo Juanito. They never found him. He was 50 years old when he died.
As Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Manila lay asleep 5,000 miles away. Invasion of Zambales by the Japanese was imminent because of the American bases in the area. In January 1942, Mount Pinatubo in Zambales became the birthplace of the guerrilla movement in Luzon, where General MacArthur assigned Lieutenant Colonel Claude Thorpe to sneak out of beleaguered Bataan and organize guerrillas to counteract massive Japanese forces.
I remember living in a nipa hut in the jungle fastnesses of Aglao, and I remember seeing my father talking with Americans. This is still very fresh in my memory, but then I learned that this is really part of history, and that this dates back to 1942, when my father intercepted a message from Colonel Thorpe enjoining every loyal Filipino to join the guerrilla movement. What he did was to organize a group of Zambaleños. They went up to Mount Pinatubo, where Colonel Thorpe and his men were hidden, and they met with him, and also another army officer, and I think that was Captain McGuire. My father was immediately inducted as captain in the Western Luzon guerrilla forces, with the task of recruiting more men to join the movement.
Thorpe and McGuire often met with the Rodriguez brothers, Uniciano, Dalmacio, and Venancio, and the Magsaysay brothers, Jesus and Ramon, in Sawang. Negrito bowmen, led by Pan Militia, provided security during these secret meetings. Colonel Giles Merrill took over Thorpe's command when he was killed by Filipino spies. He changed the WLGF to Zambales Military District. he appointed Ramon Magsaysay as headquarters commandant.
He was ordered to set up an intelligence unit in Manila and get food and medical supplies. The collected money and medicines were delivered to the guerrillas in Zambales and the prisoners confined at the University of Santo Tomas.
Like his father before him, Ramon, or Monching as he is known to family and friends, served the needs of his fellow countrymen in the time of war.
When he was still a guerrilla, my cousin Vic was trying. Vic's about 2 years older, younger than me. So my father was sleeping and it woke him up and he held Vic on his waist and put him up like that to quiet him and put him down slowly. So you could imagine a 3-year-old being frightened, but that quieted him.
Story. This guy will never say to make the long story short. He always says to make the short story long.
Yun si Captain America. Very handsome fellow. But pag nakita mo daw yung isang mata niya na naging duling, tumakbo ka na. Talaga yun, magapang. Yung fling daw si Joe Vicente, naku, run for the hills, boy.
There are certainly many more stories we could tell about the Magsaysays and Rodriguezes, but we've run out of time. The objective of this documentary is for all of us to know where we've come from in order to appreciate who we are now and where we are going. We hope this inspires you to find out more about our ancestors and to share their stories with our families. The stories, though, should not end with our ancestors. Our lives are wonderful stories in themselves, and we can pass them on to our children and our children's children. We would like to dedicate this film to those who have inspired us and who have gone before us. As we look upon their faces, let us take a moment of silence in honor of their memories.